A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2022 followed 235 post-menopausal women aged 55 to 75 over 12 months. These weren't women with severe osteoporosis. They had mild to moderate bone loss, the kind most women in their 60s don't even know they have. Researchers divided them into 3 groups. One group ate 50 grams of dried prunes daily, about 4 to 6 prunes. Another ate 100 grams, and a third ate none. All 3 groups received calcium and vitamin D as standard of care. The result? The group eating just 4 to 6 prunes a day preserved their total hip bone mineral density over the entire 12 months. Not just slowed the loss, preserved it. The control group, also taking calcium and vitamin D, continued losing bone. I'm Dr. Helen Marlowe, women's health researcher. For 15 years, I've focused specifically on what happens to the female body after estrogen drops. The mechanisms, the cascades, the downstream effects that most women never hear explained in full. The studies I review are almost all conducted in postmenopausal women specifically, because what happens in a 35-year-old body is not what happens in yours. The biology is categorically different, and the research needs to reflect that. What I want to do today is show you 7 foods with specific, measurable effects on actual bone density, measured by DEXA scans, in women your age, published in peer-reviewed journals. 5 distinct biological mechanisms explain why they work. The doses come directly from randomized controlled trials, not from wellness influencers or supplement company opinion pieces. By the end of this, you'll understand not just which foods matter, but why they matter in a body that has lost its estrogen. Understanding the mechanism is what makes the change sustainable. It's hard to eat 4 prunes a day out of vague faith. It's much easier when you know exactly what those prunes are doing to your osteoclasts. If evidence-based women's health research, designed specifically for postmenopausal biology, not generic senior health, is useful to you, subscribing helps this channel grow. Thank you for being here. Let me start with the foundational problem. According to the North American Menopause Society, women lose 2 to 3% of trabecular bone every single year in the first 5 to 7 years after menopause. That's not gradual. That's an accelerated window of loss happening right now, or recently, for most of you watching. Over those first 7 years, a woman can lose 15 to 20% of her total bone mass. The lifetime risk of an osteoporotic fracture for a woman over 50 is greater than her combined lifetime risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke, all 3 combined. And yet bone density rarely comes up in annual checkups until something breaks. The 2022 Penn State Prune study, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition by D'Souza and colleagues, is a 12-month randomized controlled trial with 235 postmenopausal women aged 55 to 75 with low bone mass, T-scores between 0 and -3.0. The 50-gram group showed statistically significant preservation of total hip bone mineral density at both 6 and 12 months. Compliance was 90.2% over the year, extraordinarily high for any dietary intervention. The 100-gram group had 41% dropout due to GI discomfort and showed no meaningfully better bone outcomes. More prunes didn't mean more protection. A 2024 secondary analysis of that same study, published in Osteoporosis International by Colton and colleagues, used peripheral quantitative computed tomography to look at cortical bone quality, the structural outer shell that actually determines fracture resistance under load. The pooled prune groups preserved cortical volumetric bone density and estimated bone strength at the tibia. The prunes weren't just maintaining density numbers on a scan. They were maintaining structural integrity. The data on soy isoflavones has accumulated substantially. A 2021 systematic review and meta-analysis in the Journal of Clinical Medicine by Canidis and colleagues pooled 18 randomized controlled trials on soy isoflavones and bone in postmenopausal women. Daily intake of approximately 106 milligrams of isoflavones over 6 to 24 months produced statistically significant improvement in lumbar spine bone mineral density. A weighted mean difference of positive 1.63%, confidence interval 0.51 to 2.75, p equals 0.0004. Stronger effects appeared at doses above 90 milligrams per day. The 2024 update, published in Osteoporosis International by InPan and colleagues, pooled 63 randomized controlled trials. 63. It confirmed bone protection in post-menopausal women and documented a 23% decrease in the bone resorption marker, DPD, compared to baseline. The demolition of bone was measurably slowing. From omega-3 fatty acids, the most recent population-level data comes from a 2025 cross-sectional study in Frontiers in Nutrition by Liu and colleagues, analyzing the NHANES dataset with 8,889 adults. In the female subgroup, women in the highest quartile of omega-3 dietary intake had an odds ratio of 0.65 for osteoporosis, compared to women in the lowest quartile, a 35% lower likelihood. Cross-sectional design has real limits. It cannot establish causation the way an RCT does. But the dose-response relationship across the quartiles, combined with mechanistic research on how omega-3s suppress osteoclast-activating cytokines, gives this finding biological coherence. For vitamin K2, a 2020 registered clinical trial in Calcified Tissue International by Zhang and colleagues tested 4 arms in 311 adults aged 50 to 75. Placebo, 50 micrograms MK7, 90 micrograms MK7, and 90 micrograms plus calcium and vitamin D. The 90 microgram dose significantly reduced femoral neck bone loss in postmenopausal women. Treatment by time interaction, p equals 0.006. The ratio of carboxylated to undercarboxylated osteocalcin, a functional marker of vitamin K2 activity in bone, improved significantly. Adding calcium and vitamin D on top of K2 produced no additional benefit over K2 alone. A multi-center European randomized controlled trial, reviewed in a 2021 Nutrients paper by Berea and colleagues, prescribed a full Mediterranean diet to postmenopausal women over 12 months versus informational leaflets for controls. The Mediterranean diet group had a significantly lower rate of bone mineral density loss. The researchers attributed the effect to combined anti-inflammatory and bone-active nutrients working simultaneously. Carotenoids suppressing osteoclast formation, vitamin K supporting osteocalcin, selenium, vitamin C, polyphenols, and calcium from varied sources. Not one nutrient winning the game. A full team on the field at once. Now the mechanisms. The research is not describing a single pathway problem. It's 5 interconnected biological processes, each worsened by estrogen loss, each addressed by specific foods through different means. The first and most fundamental is what I call the estrogen-osteoclast axis. Before menopause, estrogen manages a molecular system called the Rankel-OPG pathway. Rankel is a signaling molecule that activates osteoclasts, your bone's demolition cells. OPG is osteoprotogerin, the natural inhibitor. Estrogen suppresses Rankel and upregulates OPG. When estrogen disappears, dropping roughly 65% within 12 months of menopause, this regulatory system loses its supervisor. Rankel expression rises, OPG falls. The demolition crew runs unchecked. 2 to 3% of trabecular bone per year, every year during the loss window. Think of your bones like a building under continuous renovation. There's a construction crew, osteoblasts, and a demolition crew, osteoclasts. Before menopause, estrogen is the experienced site manager who keeps both crews on schedule and ensures construction keeps pace with demolition. At menopause, the site manager disappears. Demolition continues on instinct. Construction can't keep up. Prune polyphenols inhibit the signaling pathway that recruits new demolition crew members. Soy isoflavones partially restore the OPG brake on RANKL. Both are addressing the supervisory gap through different molecular entry points. The second mechanism operates at the level of calcium routing, and it explains why calcium and vitamin D alone, despite being the foundational recommendation, are necessary but not sufficient. This involves osteocalcin, a protein produced by osteoblasts to bind calcium and embed it in bone matrix. But osteocalcin only functions when properly activated through carboxylation, a process that requires vitamin K2 as a cofactor. Without K2, osteocalcin remains undercarboxylated and non-functional. The calcium you're consuming arrives but has no coordinates for where to go. Postmenopausal women consistently show higher undercarboxylated osteocalcin levels than premenopausal women, and the ratio of undercarboxylated to carboxylated osteocalcin independently predicts hip fracture risk. A 2024 meta-analysis in Bone and Joint Research, pooling 12 studies, confirmed vitamin K increases carboxylated osteocalcin and lumbar spine BMD specifically in postmenopausal women. The analogy: calcium is a delivery truck. Osteocalcin is the GPS. Without vitamin K2, the GPS has no programming. The truck arrives, but with no destination coordinates, it drives in circles, or delivers to the wrong address entirely, which in this case may mean arterial walls rather than bone. Natto and aged hard cheeses like Gouda and Edam are the richest practical food sources of vitamin K2 in the MK7 form, which has the highest bioavailability and longest half-life of all K2 variants. The third mechanism explains the prune effect more completely. Prunes contain neochlorogenic and chlorogenic acids, polyphenols that inhibit osteoclastogenesis. Not just slowing existing demolition crews, but reducing how many new ones get recruited. The 2024 Damani secondary analysis of the Prune study found that 50 grams daily attenuated pro-inflammatory cytokine secretion and altered monocyte activation in postmenopausal women over 12 months. This matters because the postmenopausal inflammatory environment, what researchers call inflammaging, is directly amplified by estrogen withdrawal. Estrogen was suppressing IL-6, TNF-alpha, and IL-1 beta. Without it, these cytokines run chronically elevated, and they are potent osteoclast activators. Prune polyphenols deliver a countersignal into that inflamed environment. There is also an emerging gut microbiome dimension. Prune polyphenols alter intestinal bacteria in ways that increase short-chain fatty acid production, and SCFAs appear to influence calcium absorption and systemic inflammatory pathways in bone-relevant ways. The microbiome bone axis research is still developing, but the RCT results in postmenopausal women are real, regardless of which specific submechanism is driving them. The fourth mechanism explains why soy specifically matters in estrogen-depleted physiology. Soy isoflavones, primarily genistein and daidzein, are structural analogs of 17-beta-estradiol. Their molecular shape allows them to bind estrogen receptors, with a strong preference for estrogen receptor beta, which is highly expressed in bone tissue. Their binding affinity is roughly 1/1000th the potency of actual estrogen. This selectivity is what makes them function like a dietary SERM, selectively activating bone-protective gene expression, specifically upregulating OPG and suppressing rankle, without replicating the full systemic estrogenic activity that raises concern in hormone-sensitive tissues. The skeleton key analogy. Estrogen was the master key to your bone's protective locks. After menopause, that key has been removed from the keychain. Soy isoflavones are a skeleton key. Imperfect, not a copy, but fitting well enough in the bone lock to keep the signal alive, even weakly. 63 randomized controlled trials in postmenopausal women confirm this works measurably. One practical note: women who metabolize isoflavones into equal, a more potent receptor-binding compound, show stronger bone protective effects. Equal production depends on gut microbiome composition. Roughly 30 to 40% of Western women produce equal, compared to 50 to 60% of Asian women. Fermented soy, tempeh, and miso converts isoflavones to more bioavailable forms regardless of gut flora, which is why they're worth prioritizing over non-fermented options. The fifth mechanism is where omega-3 fatty acids enter directly. After menopause, chronically elevated IL-6, TNF-alpha, and prostaglandin E2 don't just cause vague inflammation. They are among the most potent known stimulators of RANKL expression, meaning they're directly amplifying the osteoclast activation that was already unregulated by estrogen's departure. Two separate mechanisms pushing bone resorption in the same direction simultaneously. EPA and DHA from fatty fish are converted into resolvins and protectins that specifically downregulate these cytokines. They also compete with arachidonic acid for the same metabolic enzymes, shifting production away from pro-inflammatory prostaglandins. The NHANES data captures this mechanism's population-level consequence. Omega-3s combined with weight-bearing exercise produce better bone outcomes than exercise alone in postmenopausal women in mechanistic trials, because the exercise stimulates osteoblast formation, while the omega-3s suppress the inflammatory environment that was driving osteoclast activation. Now, what do you actually do with this? The first thing to add, based on quality of evidence, is 4 to 6 prunes per day, the 50-gram dose tested in the 2022 RCT with 90% compliance over 12 months and statistically significant hip BMD preservation. Start with 2 or 3 if your digestive system is sensitive. Build to 6 over 1 to 2 weeks. Morning oatmeal, afternoon snack, yogurt. Prunes contain vitamin K1. If you're on warfarin, keep your intake consistent and tell your physician. NOACs like Eliquis, Xarelto, and Pradaxa have no vitamin K food interaction. 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week address the omega-3 anti-inflammatory pathway. Deliver naturally occurring vitamin D3 at roughly 400 to 600 IU per 100 grams of salmon, and provide high-quality protein essential for bone matrix synthesis. Sardines with bones deliver calcium, omega-3s, and vitamin D simultaneously, and canned is nutritionally equivalent to fresh. Stick with salmon, sardines, herring, and light tuna. Avoid swordfish and king mackerel for mercury reasons. Daily dark leafy greens. Kale, bok choy, broccoli, collards address vitamin K1 for the osteocalcin pathway and provide calcium that's often better absorbed than dairy calcium. Cooked bok choy delivers approximately 340 milligrams of calcium per cup. Cooked kale provides roughly 180 milligrams of calcium and 500 micrograms of K1. Critical preparation point: pair with a fat source. Vitamin K is fat-soluble. Eating kale with no fat absorbs perhaps 5 to 10% of K1 present. Olive oil changes that substantially. For soy foods, target 1 to 2 servings daily to reach the 75 to 100 milligram isoflavone range. 100 grams of firm tofu provides approximately 40 milligrams. 150 grams of edamame, around 50 milligrams. Tempeh, at approximately 43 milligrams per 100 grams, has higher bioavailability because fermentation partially breaks down phytates that inhibit isoflavone absorption. One safety note, stated directly: women with a history of estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer or currently on tamoxifen or aromatase inhibitors should discuss soy food intake with their oncologist before making significant dietary changes. The evidence on whole food soy safety in this population is genuinely debated, and this is not a decision to make without medical guidance. Fermented foods for vitamin K2, primarily natto, aged Gouda, Edam, and kefir. Natto provides over 1,100 micrograms of MK7 per 100 grams, far exceeding the 90 microgram daily dose established as effective in the Zhang 2020 RCT. Its flavor is strongly acquired. 2 to 3 servings per week covers K2 thoroughly if you can tolerate it. If you can't, 30 grams of aged hard cheese provides 50 to 75 micrograms of K2 daily, a consistent and accessible alternative. Dairy or calcium-rich plant-based equivalents remain foundational. The Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation recommends 1,200 milligrams of total daily calcium for women over 50. A 2024 nationwide cohort study did raise a cardiovascular signal for high-dose calcium supplements specifically, not for food calcium. Prioritize food calcium first. If supplementing, keep total supplemental calcium below 1,000 milligrams per day and choose calcium citrate over calcium carbonate, since citrate doesn't require stomach acid for absorption, and stomach acid production typically declines after 50. Ground flaxseed, chia, and walnuts contribute plant ALA omega-3s and, more critically, magnesium. Magnesium is the cofactor for enzymatic activation of vitamin D in the kidney. Without adequate magnesium, the vitamin D you're taking cannot convert fully to its active 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D form. The recommended intake for women over 50 is 320 milligrams per day. 2 tablespoons of chia provides 95 milligrams. 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed provides 52 milligrams. 30 grams of walnuts provides 45 milligrams. Ground flaxseed, not whole. Whole seeds pass through undigested. Regarding HRT, estrogen-based hormone replacement directly addresses the root mechanism by restoring the estrogen signal, regulating rankle and OPG. NAM's 2021 guidelines support HRT as effective for bone protection in appropriate candidates. If you are on HRT, the dietary protocol in this video is complementary to it, not a replacement. These foods amplify and sustain HRT's bone benefits and address metabolic and inflammatory dimensions HRT alone does not. If you're HRT hesitant or have medical reasons against it, these 7 foods represent the strongest food-based evidence currently available for post-menopausal bone protection. They won't fully replicate HRT's effect. The research doesn't support claiming that. But the effects they produce are real, measurable on DEXA, and documented in women who look like you, biologically and demographically. For women with established osteoporosis, T-score below -2.5, pharmacological treatment is required alongside these dietary changes. The dietary protocol is important and beneficial. It is not sufficient as a standalone intervention when fracture risk is high. Seek urgent medical attention for any sudden mid-spine or lower back pain, hip pain after a minor stumble, significant height loss versus your young adult height, or wrist fracture from catching yourself during a fall. On timeline, the Prunes study showed statistically significant hip BMD preservation at 6 months. Bone turnover markers, the blood and urine tests reflecting bone breakdown and formation rates, typically begin shifting within 3 to 6 months of consistent soy isoflavone intake, with DEXA-visible BMD changes at 12 to 24 months. Vitamin K2's Osteocalcin carboxylation effect improves within 4 to 8 weeks. Omega-3 anti-inflammatory cytokine changes are measurable within 6 to 12 weeks. We examined 6 studies in postmenopausal women published between 2020 and 2025, spanning 2 RCTs on prunes, 2 meta-analyses on soy covering 63 combined randomized trials, a large NHANES population study on omega-3 fatty acids, a 4-arm vitamin K2 RCT, and a multi-center Mediterranean diet trial. The evidence consistently points to 5 overlapping biological pathways: the estrogen osteoclast axis, osteocalcin carboxylation, polyphenol-mediated osteoclastogenesis inhibition, phytoestrogens SERM-like signaling at bone, and omega-3-driven suppression of rankle-activating cytokines, as the mechanisms through which these foods produce measurable bone protection. The prune data surprised me when I first reviewed this literature. The depth of the soy meta-analysis surprised me. The specificity of the vitamin K2 mechanism in postmenopausal bone was clearer than I expected from food-based research. What didn't surprise me was the underlying logic. A body that has lost estrogen has lost the master regulator of bone resorption, and multiple dietary compounds, the right compounds, at evidence-based doses, consistently over time, can partially and meaningfully compensate through different molecular entry points. The research on postmenopausal bone has grown significantly in the last decade. You are not without data. You may be without a clear translation of what that data means for your specific biology. That's what I try to do here. Questions about the research? A study you think I should cover? Leave it in the comments. This community guides what I investigate next. Keep investigating your own health. This is Dr. Helen Marlowe. I'll see you in the next one.